In the summer of 1888, three geologists rode into a canyon on the Colorado Plateau and did not ride out. Their names were entered into the field logs of a small territorial survey office in Durango, and then, later, quietly removed from those same logs by a hand that did not sign its work. The horses came back, the mules came back. One saddlebag was found tied to the neck of a mule, and inside that bag was a folded sheet of surveyor's paper on which one of the three men had written, in a hand that grew less steady with every line, that they had found a door. It was made of iron set into the living rock of the canyon wall, with a handle shaped for a human hand but placed at a height no ordinary person could comfortably reach. Above the door, cut into the sandstone in a script none of them recognized, ran a warning that the Anasazi elders of the nearest village, when shown a rubbing of it 4 days earlier, had begged them not to translate, and had begged them more urgently not to open. They opened it anyway. The note ends there. Those three men are not mentioned again in any surviving territorial record. A rubbing of the inscription, said to have been carried by one of them in an oilskin pouch, has never surfaced in any museum or private collection that has ever been catalogued. Within a year, the village whose elders had spoken to them was abandoned, its residents dispersing to other pueblos and refusing to speak to outsiders about what had happened. The location of the door itself, the exact place on the plateau where three trained men of science walked into a hole in the earth and were erased from the paper trail of the United States government, has been suppressed so thoroughly that even the descendants of the local families who knew the way have said, on the very rare occasions they have said anything at all, that the way was closed on purpose, and closed by people who were not the ones who cut the door. What follows is an account of what those three men appear to have found, of what the Anasazi elders had been trying to warn them about for 800 years before they arrived, and of why the door itself, along with the 20 or 30 others we now have reason to believe were placed alongside it, does not belong to the civilization the history books say lived on that plateau. They belong to something older, something the ancestral Puebloans inherited, guarded, sealed, and lost, and something that, based on the physical evidence still standing on those cliffs today, was never fully theirs to begin with. The canyon country of the Four Corners region is among the most archaeologically dense landscapes on the continent. Between roughly 900 and 1300 of the Common Era, a people whom modern archaeology calls the ancestral Puebloans, and whom the Navajo later called the Anasazi, built a civilization of stone stretching across present-day New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Arizona. They built Chaco Canyon, with its great houses of dressed masonry rising 4 and 5 stories from a canyon floor that receives less than 9 inches of rain a year. At Mesa Verde they built cliff dwellings tucked into alcoves halfway up sandstone walls, reached only by hand and footholds cut into the rock. Their work extended to Aztec, Salmon, Chimney Rock, Hovenweep, and dozens of smaller sites, whose names are known only to the archaeologists who catalogue them and the descendants who visit them quietly and do not put up signs. Then, around 1280, they walked away. Every major centre was abandoned within roughly a single human lifetime. The people did not vanish. Their descendants live today at Tacoma, Hopi, Zuni, and the Rio Grande Pueblos, carrying oral tradition transmitted continuously from that time to this. But the great houses, cliff dwellings, astronomical observatories, and ceremonial roads that ran for hundreds of miles in dead straight lines across country that would have made any sensible builder curve them around obstacles, all of it was left. Their descendants have their own explanation. It has to do with what was found in the ground, and with what was already there when the ancestors arrived. The three men who rode into the canyon in 1888 were not amateurs, and they were not treasure hunters. Their names, as they appear in the last surviving field log entry before the redaction, were Henry Colwell, Jonathan Rees, and a third man listed only as Ashworth, whose first name has been lost. Colwell had studied at Yale under James Dwight Dana, whose textbook was the standard reference for every mining engineer in the country in that decade. Rees had come out of the Pennsylvania coal country and had spent 5 years mapping the Front Range for a private consortium before joining the survey. Ashworth was younger, in his late 20s, trained in Germany, and carried the small brass instrument case that held the sextant, the aneroid barometer, and the pocket compendium in which the last note was written. Their assignment was to assess the mineral potential of a formation noted in passing by a Bureau of Ethnology party that had come through the previous autumn. The ethnologists had reported what they called anomalous stone structures in the wall of a side canyon, and had noted that local Puebloan guides refused to approach the site and refused. I have to pause here for a second, because what I just described, that is one case from a much larger pattern. There are 35 documented cases in a document I put together. Different cities, different decades, different types of evidence. Every single one follows the same sequence: discovered, documented, acquired, disappeared. I could not fit all of it into a video. It's in the pinned comment below. Find it before we continue. Used, in fact, to name it. The geologists were not there for the structures. They were there for the copper stain the ethnologists had described running down the sandstone below one of the openings, a blue-green color that suggested a substantial ore body somewhere behind the rock face. They arrived at the mouth of the side